So I think we've established that if you have functional abdominal pain, nobody should be doubting that the pain is real. It can be severe, but because it's not due to a disease, it is not dangerous. However, real pain can have real consequences and should be managed in a timely way, just like pain due to disease. Because the pain leads to suffering and can sometimes lead to disability, just like a real disease. So to help introduce this concept a bit further, I'm going to introduce a new term called illness, which again you probably all heard of in some way or another. Um, but I want to use it in the term that a lot of people do to describe why two people can perhaps feel differently, um, despite having a similar cause or different causes for suffering. So illness is often considered to be actually be the suffering, or we think of it as symptoms that someone experiences. So pain would be an example of suffering, but there's many other things that can cause suffering. Illness is subjective, which means it's very individual, and for that reason, um, two people, for example, two young men could have very similar aches or pains from the same disease, and the disease may not bother the first person, while the other person suffers a great deal with it. And one possible reason could be that the second person um, may have more severe uh, pain because of more severe disease, but they could also have he could also have had similar, even less severe disease and be actually suffering more as a result of that. Um, and why that is, people we don't know, but it's seen in many different diseases. Um, but we also know, again, that suffering does not have to occur even with a disease. And so, again, showing how variable or different people can respond to suffering from something. There's also the idea of disability, which I think is another important concept because it really can play into how some people are experiencing, particularly with functional abdominal pain. So disability helps explain why two people can actually suffer the same, so they could actually have the same pain in the same amount, but have different consequences and different uh, changes in their life as a result of it. So disability refers to when somebody has limited or zero ability to take part in their regular daily activities. And this is obviously usually because of either an impairment or symptom uh, as a result of the condition that we're considering. So for example, pain with functional abdominal pain, but another example would be leg pain. So if I had significant leg pain, um, that could certainly affect how I function um, in most of my activities that depend on walking. However, some people may have the exact same amount of pain as me, but be able to do far more, walk for far longer than me, or walk far less. So that's important, but also it's important to consider what that person was doing beforehand. So, for example, say you um, were a gymnast and you did a lot of activities prior, and you have a lot, and you know that you need to um, be free of tummy pain to act as a gymnast. So tummy pain may not impact somebody else as much as it would you, because that's more important to your life. Is to an activity that requires you to be free of tummy pain for all the activities, for all the movements that you have to do as a gymnast. And also, it can be disheartening if you were functioning at a really high level prior, and now even though you're able to function fairly well for most things, that was a big part of your life. And the last thing is the other piece, which would be how can you tolerate the pain or the symptom, and how will that affect your ability? So, for example, some people with the same amount of tummy pain can do more activities without it bothering them, and we'll talk a bit about that because you definitely have a role to play in your recovery or your rehabilitation, is what we call it. But there's and then there's also the piece about how things can be done to help you accommodate or get back to things as well. So those two concepts together are actually what form the basis of rehabilitation. And putting this all together, or using this to apply to functional abdominal pain, we've already established it's not a disease, it's real pain, which means it's suffering, and so it's an illness, but without a disease. Most of the time, functional abdominal pain does not result in significant disability. It's not fun to experience the pain, but you can still do well at school, develop friendships, and pursue all the activities that you enjoy doing outside of school. In some cases, though, the pain begins to routinely affect these activities and causes disability. And when that happens, it's called functional abdominal pain syndrome. And in that state, the disability is actually the more important thing and requires that everyone look at all these factors that we just discussed that are contributing to the suffering and especially the disability. So the pain is still important to be discussed, but there's more to it than that, and everyone needs to take a step back and look at the impact that the pain has had.